What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some buy low trade targets heading into week 8 of the NFL season. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe. Any questions, drop them down below. I'll make sure to get back to every single person. But let's just dive right into the buy low players. And I want to start off by talking about the Dolphins' big three. That is going to be Devonta Anan, Tyreek Hill, and Jaylen Wadd. Now, I talked about these guys prior to the bye week, so I think that would have been heading into week 6 or heading into week 7. And so I think now at this point, maybe you guys are sitting here thinking like they're very obvious buy lows with Tua potentially returning in week 8. But I still don't think we can overlook just how fed up the fantasy owners of these players might be. I mean, trust me, I was someone who was very in on Devonta Anan. I was very in on Jaylen Wadd heading into the season, and they've been very rough. These are like round 2, round 3 picks that have pretty much just been complete flops in their lineup, ever since Tua went down in week 2. Now, it does seem like Tua is definitely trending in the right direction. I would anticipate him playing here in week 8. It seems like those are the reports we're getting. Seems like he doesn't have any lingering symptoms, and I do think he's probably going to be out there in week 8, which I do think can just completely turn this offense around. And even though I do think people are going to expect, if they have Achane, if they have Tyreek Hill, if they have Jaylen Wadd, I do think they're going to expect this offense to get better. I think they're going to expect these players to perform better. But I don't know if they're thinking that this offense is going to take a massive leap, like right back into what we saw before the Tua injury. Because, you can see 4 or 5 weeks of consistent bad production. It might be tough to reframe in your mind, like all of a sudden Tua is going to come back in and everything's going to be perfectly fine for all 3 of these players. So let's start off by talking about Devonta Anan here. He really didn't have like a great fantasy day, but I actually thought this was a pretty encouraging performance from him. He had 15 carries for 77 yards. I think it was important for him to log an efficient game on the ground. He had struggled with that early on in the season. That's really where he thrived last year. Super efficient on the ground. Insane efficiency all across the board. Had not had that early on, so good to see that here in week 7. He also logged a 65% route participation, so Devonta Achane's usage was great coming off the bye week, coming off the concussion. I will say Raheem Mostert did take the goal line snaps, but I don't think that's something that's like set in stone. We saw earlier on, I think week 1 with Achane and Mostert. Achane was actually the guy who got the goal line carries, so I'm guessing there's going to be some sort of split there. Don't think Mostert's just going to like dominate in that area rest of season. But I truly do believe that with Tua back, I think Achane's going to be a top 10 fantasy running back, and I think he has real top 5 upside. In the 2 games this season where Tua started, Achane put up 23 and 29.5 PPR points, and we were seeing him take that big jump in the receiving department. He was targeted 7 times in both those games. I believe he caught 13 of those 14 targets. So with Tua back, the touchdown upside is going to be there. The efficiency is going to be better. He's going to have more receiving usage. I really like Achane here as a buy low. Now let's shift over to the wide receivers, and starting off here with Tyreek Hill. He has been absolutely awful without Tua at quarterback. He has put up under 9 PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games, and he has not hit 13 PPR points since week 1 with Tua. He is coming off by far his worst game here in week 7. 2 targets, 1 reception, 8 yards. And this is kind of what I mean when I'm talking about like the fantasy owners rostering these players. I think it's tough in their minds to see see Hill go 1 for 8, completely flopping your lineup, and then all of a sudden expect him to be a mid to high end RB1 just with a quarterback change or wide receiver 1. It's honestly been kind of shocking how unable Mike McDaniel has been to scheme up touches for Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Wadd. But I also don't think we're in a spot here where like Hill is washed. I don't think it's a coincidence that in Tua's only full game, Tyreek Hill gets targeted 12 times, catches 7 of them for 130 yards and a touchdown. If Tua is back here in week 8, like I throw Tyreek Hill right in as a weekly wide receiver 1. Maybe that's crazy based on how bad he's been, but I almost compare it to like the Anthony Richardson, Joe Flacco situation. The quarterback position can truly make all the difference. You see Josh Downs, Michael Pittman having super productive games with Flacco at quarterback. They change it up to Richardson, and those guys are completely irrelevant for fantasy. I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen here and what has been happening with these Dolphins wide receivers. So I like Tyreek Hill as a buy low. I also like Jaylen Wadd, whose, value is probably just down the drain at this point. He had a solid week 1, 5 for 109. Since then, he has just been completely useless. He has not hit 9 PPR points since that week 1 game. He has not hit 50 receiving yards since that week 1 game. And then week 7, 1 reception for 11 yards. Both Hill and Waddle only targeted twice in that game. But once again, we have a fairly large sample size of Tua at quarterback with Tyreek Hill as the wide receiver 1, Jaylen Waddle as the wide receiver 2. And if Tua is at quarterback, Jaylen Waddle is giving you that wide receiver 2 fantasy production. So I like these 3 Dolphins players as buy lows. Before you get Tua back and the production skyrockets for these guys, I would try to see if I can buy low on them. Now, shifting into my next buy low, it is going to be Chase Brown. And this was a down overall game from this Bengals backfield, but Chase Brown's usage looked really strong. He took 15 of the 21 running back carries. He also saw 2 of the 5 targets. He didn't really, do a ton with those opportunities, wasn't super efficient, but he was still the more efficient option than Zach Moss, who racked up only 7 yards on his 6 carries. Zach Moss has really kind of hit a wall over the last few weeks. He's been under 3.5 yards per carry in 4 straight games, and week after week, it just seems like Chase Brown is taking a larger and larger chunk of this backfield. Like, this started off looking like Zach Moss was the clear running back 1, then it kind of shifted into, all right, Chase Brown, Zach Moss, 50-50 split. Last couple of weeks, it definitely looks like Chase Brown is pulling away. And prior to this game, Chase Brown had been very productive fantasy-wise. 3 straight games with 14 plus PPR points. I think he's going to be a strong weekly running back 2 play. And if he can continue to pull away in this backfield, this offense kind of gets back on track after a couple down games, I do think he has like top 12 running back upside rest of season for fantasy. So Chase Brown, really like him here as a buy low. If people still think he's like in this very close committee with Zach Moss. And then my final buy low player is going to be Jameson Williams. And this was undoubtedly just a brutal game out of JMO. He had been rolling through 5 games, 14 plus PPR points in 4 of those 5. This looked like a smash matchup. I thought JMO was going to be a great play this week. The Vikings allowed the most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. The Lions honestly racked up a decent amount of passing production. It just did not, go through Jameson Williams. Was targeted 1 time, caught it for -4 yards. So just an awful game for JMO, completely flopped in your lineup if you did play him. And I think for people who have been rostering Jameson Williams, this could have been a spot where, right, first 2 weeks, has some nice games. Maybe they're like, all right, I think I can play this guy in my lineup. Week 3, he flops. All right, now he's back to the bench. Then he has 2 more solid games. I feel like we're in this weird spot where he's almost been played more in the lineups where he's flopped than when he's played well. So I think the Jameson Williams owner might be kind of frustrated. They don't think they can trust him week to week. And I do think this game was a sobering reminder of the floor of Jameson Williams. We know he has a pretty high weekly ceiling, but the floor is also very, very low just based on his big play upside, the lack of consistent volume. But I still think he's a viable weekly play. He's just more of a boom bust option. Now, I know some people don't like that. They want players with very high floors. They don't really care if they have that like nuclear upside. And so if you don't like that type of player, I get it. But if you're in leagues where you're starting 3 wide receivers, multiple flexes, or just like multiple flexes in general, and like that bottom flex spot doesn't have to be like the strongest, best option, I still think Jameson Williams is going to be playable. He was still the clear wide receiver 2 in routes, 83% route participation. He's still gone for 70 plus receiving yards, 14 plus PPR points in 4 of his 6 games. And then when you look at the Lions' rest of season schedule, I think they have the potential to get into some shootouts where the passing volume is going to need to be there. There are lots of games moving forward. Looking at the schedule here, they have the Packers twice, Texans, 49ers, Bills, Bears twice. Like, these are games that could become kind of high scoring, going up against some solid offenses. I also think with the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, the defense probably going to struggle a little bit. They've already been in some fairly high scoring games. So I think if, someone's looking at JMO, they're viewing him as just like a throw-in piece to a trade. I do think he's more than that at this point. Like I said, the weekly floor is very low, but he still has that upside. He has the big playability. I still think he's going to be like a weekly fantasy RB3 or wide receiver 3 flex play. And so if you can just get him as like an add-in on a deal, I definitely would look to do that. But that is going to wrap it up for some of my buy low trade targets heading into week 8. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.